before we get started. Let me check here. Looks like we're not live yet, but it is coming up. While it's waiting, where is it right here? Okay, I think I see it. Do you have it pulled up on your screen, Etta, as well?
Oh, no. I didn't want to put it on my screen because I don't want the double audio. I don't want the feedback on anything. So I'm just using the stream link you gave.
Gotcha. Okay. Looks like we're pretty good. It shows that we are live. So we're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome, everyone, to another weekly live stream on Subtle Asian Voices. We have a very special guest. I don't even know how long I know Mark. It's been a long, long time. But a good friend, a very awesome guy that we have on the guest today. We're going to talk about a very adulting topic, personal finance. And why don't we actually have you do a quick introduction, Mark?
Hey guys, what's up? My name is Mark Kiana. A little bit, a little bit about me. I'm currently residing in New York, and I work as a data engineer. And then how me and Brian met. Brian's like, he doesn't remember. I actually remember the exact moment me and Brian met.
Really?
So back in 2008, I was a choreographer for a group for the Filipino Student Association. And one of the things I wanted to do that year was try to like dance with the other Asian organizations. So the way I met Brian was I was dancing for CASA in 2008, and we first met trying to dance to a Jay Chou song. And that's how we first met.
That is hilarious. 2008. You remember the year too. I guess that was the first year doing CASA.
Yeah, it was, I forgot what it's called, the Jay Chou song specifically, because I don't know the Chinese name, but it's the one where it's about like being a talisman person for Jiangxi. Like the video, that's what it was about.
Yeah, it's funny. 2008.
That's when I met
you. Nice. Was it a good impression or a bad impression? What did you think?
Well, oh man. Brian,
okay. Most people have a bad impression of me the first.
Brian, no, I'm about to roast you. So you got to remember, since we're all doing dance stuff, my impression of Brian and most of the other Chinese dudes was they were very rigid at dance. You got to remember, I'm Filipino, so when I watch you guys, I was
yeah.
Be hard.
Ooh, okay. So I was very stiff.
First impression. Brian got a lot better.
Very good to know. Yeah. Well, that's actually not that bad. I thought I was gonna get roasted for a second there. Okay, cool. Nice to bring back some memories. I knew that we met in dance. I didn't remember the exact moment. But now I remember the CASA thing. You came there. Then you came with some other FSA people too, didn't you?
No, I that was just the boys dance. I only did the boys dance with you guys. And
gotcha.
I think it was, I remember right, it was Tim Cabrera teaching you guys at the time.
That was a long time ago.
Bro.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So let's see. So we both went to UF, and then as we get into this, it's a very interesting topic because like I've always thought you were in finance for some reason, but it looks like your background is not in finance. Mm-hmm. Is that right?
Yeah. That's right. So, just a little bit about me. I actually went to UF when me and Brian were in school. My undergrad is in telecommunications. What that is pretty much I helped do stuff like film editing, movie sets. And then after that, I actually went to school in New York for a master's in finance. And then that's my educational background. Everything else is, self-taught or whatever else it is. And as I was telling you earlier, my career path is actually very weird. I actually started out as a chef. Then I went into movie making, filmmaking, stuff like that. Then I went into actual finance. And then now I do more like computer programming and coding stuff.
Would you say you're like a, what's that phrase? Good at all, but master of none?
Yeah, like kind of like the Da Vinci guy, but instead of really good at anything specific, like most people know, I think Da Vinci for his artwork, but he was more than that. I would say that's a pretty accurate statement. Like jack of all trades, master of none.
That is jack of all trades, master of none. Yeah, it's amazing. Like you've done so many different things along your path. Okay. Before we jump into more of the details, why don't we do a couple of rapid fire questions? So it's like whatever first word comes to your mind.
Mm-hmm.
say that word. Okay. Ramen or pho?
Oh, that's hard. Ramen.
East Coast or West Coast?
West Coast.
Freestyle dance or choreography?
Freestyle.
I figured that one. Europe or Asia?
Asia.
Apple or Windows?
I'm sorry, Windows.
Ooh, okay. That was unexpected. Big city or countryside?
Big city.
Should have figured it since you're in New York.
Yeah.
Okay, so why don't we jump into the first big question? And this is actually why I thought about bringing you onto the channel. Is it seems as though we were talking about, spending money on experiences, not being too frugal. That's how this kind of got started.
Right.
But it seems as though it stemmed from a story that happened to you personally. Like
Right.
You were in a situation and your friend reached out to you, was like, why are you working so hard? So I don't think you actually shared the story with me in detail. Why don't you tell me a little bit about that? Like what happened in that scenario?
Sure. So I would say like once I was getting like my master's and I started working, right, I worked hard. Like I probably was putting in easily, every week close to 60, 80-hour weeks. And I had this mentality of what a lot of people always hear is that time is money, right? So for me, if I wasn't generating some kind of fiscal reward for things I was doing, I wasn't very interested in doing it because that's how I valued my time, as it was a currency. And I worked hard. I told you I skipped a lot of like moments that now I kind of regret. Like I think one of my close friends' wedding, just because I was like, oh, it's cost too much. I don't want to spend that money. It was that kind of mentality I had. Like I was like, every time I get to meet would be great. And I worked so hard, and one year all my friends were doing this trip. Like my entire friend group in New York wanted to do it, and a lot of you guys probably have heard of it before. It's it's EDC Vegas, and for me, I was like, my God, that's a lot of money. It was like easily, I was like counting it. I was like, it's gonna be like 2 to 3K, right? And then I was like, no, I don't want to do it. And one of my close friends, his name is Kaylee, kind of like pulled me to the side, and he was like, why do you want to do it? Like, bro, you work so hard. Like, what do you actually do with your money? Like, he asked me that question. Man, I've never felt so attacked. And I was like, what do you mean? What do I do? I save it. I'm gonna flip. Like that's the goal.
Yeah.
And, as like he like layered it onto me, when that question just got me thinking, because it realized I felt so isolated once he asked me that question, because I realized when I hang out with them, they've been friends. That group was friends a little longer than I've been with them, right? But they got to talk about all these memories they had, right? But for me, I never was part of those conversations. I was always like, I'd either skip out on some of those, or even just like local stuff, I'd skip on because I didn't want to pay a bar tab or something stupid like that. And it just came to the point where I realized, wait a minute, why am I working so hard? Like at the end of the day, is the real goal to have like this huge stockpile of money, but no memories, or not to be able to conversate with anyone except for how much money I have? And it's like, yeah, it hit me. I'm like, dude, that sounds retarded now that I think about it. Like I'm pretty much trying to be Scrooge McDuck. Like, am I gonna swim in this? And that's where it hit me, where I was like, no, he's right. So I was like, forget it. I do work a lot. That was probably the first time I put in paid time off.
Wow.
Since I started working, like, because usually some of the companies I work for were like, oh, you can we'll pay it out at the end of the year if you don't use it, right? So I was like, oh, I'm never gonna take a vacation in my life.
Yeah, more money, right?
But yeah, so I did it. I experienced it, and the greatest thing about it is I've never had a regret after that, because with that group, I'm still friends with pretty much most of them, and then we always have that to talk back on, right? Like I can't put a monetary value on the memory of that time that I spent with them, and it's for me. I realized, wow, there are certain experiences that time is not money, right? Like that's it. Like you can't take away this moment from me, but that money, what would have happened to it? Maybe it would have increased. Maybe I would have done some dumb investing and lost it all. You never know. But it's not something that it would have something I could hold and cherish for the rest of my life. So that's what happened.
Yeah, and can you tell me like what part of your life or what stage you're in? Was this like a couple years out of college, like fresh out of?
Yeah, I was fresh out of my master's. I was just probably about a year out. My second job after my master's. Probably about 2 years after it, and I was working for the holding company for Lehman Brothers at that time, because they were doing some litigation stuff still.
Wow. So this is like you were pretty frugal essentially with your money for a long time.
Really frugal.
Okay. Um, very interesting. Yeah, there's a lot of mindset shifts. But before we get into like some of the other ones, because I'm kind of curious how you manage money now, since it seems like you're more um, flexible with your money, maybe not as frugal. What about during school? Especially in the context of borrowing money. Did you borrow any money for school at all? Any loans?
Yes, I did. More for my master's than I did my undergrad. I was very fortunate. So this is why I say I'm a little luckier than most. When I was in sophomore high school, my dad passed away, right? And my mom had a very real conversation with me. She was like, "Look, if you don't get scholarships or anything, or you can't get like loans, we have to send you to the Philippines to get an education. Like we can't afford it here." As a single mother, I understood that, but I've never been so scared in my entire life. I was like, I don't speak, my native tongue, and in that case, I was like, okay, and that drove me like from sophomore year up until I graduated as a senior in high school. Like my grades were astronomically good. I did a lot of extracurriculars. I literally, I got a 35 on my ACT, something like that. I pretty much got for full ride for any university, public university, and
Nice.
whatever I wanted. Yeah, and then plus the other scholarships pretty much helped me with my personal finance. But I did, so that helped a lot. But then
And I
when
guess
that's when I started taking out loans.
taking out loans.
That's when I started, having to take out loans because New York is expensive. I actually had a graduate assistantship, but cost of living was was too much. Like I was working the graduate assistant job and another job, and I still had to take out loans just because of how expensive New York is.
Wow. So I'm curious, was there a pretty big shift in thinking between how do you manage money in undergrad when you had like full rides versus spending money in New York with a master's? Like, was there pretty big differences or no?
Very. So when I was an undergrad, I wasn't as frugal with my money, right? Like I was like,
Oh, okay.
yeah, right. I was like, oh, this is money I earned it. It's free, So I spend it. I spend it. I had a good time in undergrad, and I did save. I still saved a lot. But it was a lot of scholarships. Like I probably still came out after undergrad with 5 digits easy. But the thing was, I realized I could have definitely spent my money better. When I started doing my master's and I needed stuff after like undergrad, I realized I was like, oh man, I spent my money in a dumb way when I was in undergrad. Even though I was a little smarter than most, I actually started investing really early in my life, probably around my senior year in high school. So
in senior and high school.
Yep.
Wow. So in undergrad, you were not only spending money, but you were also investing some of it too then.
Right.
Wow. You were ahead of the pack.
Yeah. Lucky, just lucky.
Not bad. Okay. So that's during school. Now let's talk about the fun stuff in terms of like after school. So how does how does it differ between your before school or during school and now after? It seems as though you're more open to spending money, especially on experiences. But how do you really approach that? Because there's still like probably some thresholds where it's like you probably are not going to drop like or maybe I don't know, 20K to go to Asia for like, I don't know, let's say 1 week, like exorbitant amounts. Like, what is your threshold? How do you approach spending money on worthwhile expenses now? Like, how do you rationalize that?
So I follow a very like strict percentage rule, right? So, for instance, I try to keep my rent wherever I live under 50% of my net income for a month.
Okay.
When I want to go, whatever is my variable expenses for a month usually stays under 10% of my net income. I save about 20 to 25% of my net income.
Wow.
And the rest is what I call like varied, because there's things that happen, you never know. Like, let's say my family needs help, stuff like that. I keep an extra like couple like 10% on the side for that kind of stuff, because especially during COVID, I realized a lot of my family would probably need help. So I changed these percentages around recently, but for the most part, the base stayed very much the same.
So do you budget then?
Yes.
You have like a budgeting system?
I do have a budgeting system.
Can I ask, what kind of system do you use to budget?
Like I said, it's all based off those percentages. So for instance, with those variable expenses, right, and fixed expenses percentages I have, I can float those across for what we just talked about, what I think will be something worthwhile. So for instance, I recently had a trip with a bunch of my really good guy friends. You know, we called it Hot Boy Summer for Vegas. You know, I was like, okay, I know that we started planning this around in March. So my variable expenses moving into July, I was like, okay, I'm only going to spend 5% or, you know, less. And then that extra that carried over, I kept adding it up until July. So once it gets to July, I'm like, okay, this is my total amount I can spend.
Oh, that's pretty like responsible budgeting and management, I would say. Okay. Is there specific software they use? I know a lot of people use Mint out there.
Oh, no. So I actually, since I'm in finance, I have a Excel spreadsheet that I work on. So like I'll change the budgeting for it every once in a while. Like I actually have to redo it because like I said, I just got a new job like 2 months ago. So some of those things don't fit in anymore. So I got to recalculate everything because my net income also changed. Yeah, I try to like I said, I try to stick to percentages, and the reason is because real dollar amounts after, God, this is calling myself out, and I know if someone's watching, they're gonna call me out on this, is equates to how much you actually earn, right? So I think at one point when I was only making a certain threshold, I'll say now, like it was under like 60K, I was in real dollar amounts, versus now that I'm at another threshold that I don't want to mention, I break it down more in percentages to be more realistic. Like, okay, I'm a little more lenient in terms of actual dollar amount. Percentage-wise, I'm still sticking to what I always used to do, so it's not too bad.
Okay. Not really related of a question, but I'm kind of curious. What is the threshold you think you would need to make to be happy? Not you necessarily, like just in general. Do you ever think that like there's a certain amount where you feel okay and safe?
See, oh my God, that is probably the hardest question I think you can ever ask anyone, because what I've realized is that, at least for me, right, no matter how much I have, I always want more. Like, it's not just money, right? It's like knowledge. It's, you know, like success. Like I'm very driven, so I don't think I've ever gotten to that point to where, like, if I ever feel content, I know because I get really scared. Like I don't feel like comfortable. Like for me, contentness is not comfortable. It's more like I get really worried, like I get anxious, and I'm just like, I don't think I'm moving, like stuff like that. Like content to me is scary. Like content to me is like most people will see content, they'll say it's in a certain space, or like you're stuck in a space where you're like, oh, I'm not gonna move at all, and this is a happy place for me. For me, contentness is this slightly moving elevation, always continuously upwards. That's why it's really weird when people ask me like, am I gonna get to that point? And I'm like, no, because that point is always moving for me.
Yeah, and I guess like the impetus for the question was because at some point you might be solely focused on money. You're just trying to get more and more money, where the opportunity cost is like you lose time with other people.
Right. So
what is that threshold that you think would be a nice balance between spending time with people you care about and also like making a good amount of money? Like what would be a good amount?
Right. So like I said, I think for everyone it's different, right? So I have a lot of like self-imposed rules I do on myself, and one of the other ones is I don't really go out on weekdays. Like you will see me, I will turtle up. You know, I will be working. I literally my day on starting Monday is go to the gym in the morning, go to work, go to gym again, work a little bit more, study, go to bed. Like all the way up until Friday night. And then Friday night is where I'm like, okay,
go ham.
Go ham. And then, you know, I start, you know, and depending on the workload, sometimes I'll start back work up on Sunday. Like we were just talking about it. Like I'm already planning on working on Sunday, but it's balanced, right? Like like my company does good for me, so I do the same for them. Like I very reciprocate like how I feel like I'm treated at wherever I work.
Okay, very interesting. Linda has a question here. What investing tips would you give to someone in high school?
All right. So one of the things I will tell you right now, because you know if you're in high school, is don't look at the true dollar amount of what you're making. Look at it in terms of percentages. And more overly now as a high schooler, you have a better opportunity than when I and Brian had when we were younger, because you guys don't have to do commission fees anymore. You guys can literally trade without ever worrying about that fixed expense. And it makes a huge difference, because when I was younger in high school, I always look at that fixed expense. So I was just like, there's no point in investing, let's say, $50, right? And I think it's only going to go up 5%, or let's say 100 to make it easier so everyone can do the math later. 100, and I don't think it's gonna go up 5% in 3 days. But then the fee for that one stock was already like $6. I'm like, I'm not gonna make anything off of it. So I always have to recalculate everything to change it up. So what I say is take advantage of that. You do not have to pay commissions. That is the craziest thing that's ever happened. Probably one of the craziest things since I've been like a personal investor. Like, take advantage of that. And again, don't look at it as true dollar amounts. Look at it in percentages, right? Because if you have $100 and then you're like, oh man, I only made $20 out of it. In my head, I see that as, wow, you killed it. You made 20% off $100. Other people are like, it's only $20 versus someone can be like, oh, I invested and I made 10,000. But what you don't know is that person invested 1 million. You did way better than them in a percentage side, right? So don't look at your true dollar amounts. Invest and look at your percentages, and those small percentage increases will end up being so good for you, because mentally it'll make you better than seeing those true dollar amounts. And then at the end, when you look at that true dollar amount, it's going to be huge. So
that's actually a really nice comment to make. That's probably one of the biggest game changers in our, well, I just graduated college recently, so I'm still relatively young. So that's big, no commission fees and stuff. Okay, Johnny asked a pretty interesting question here. What about people who have babies?
All right, so that's me personally, I'm single, so I don't know too much about the finances with having like.
Wait. I don't want to interrupt. Are you single? But are you single and ready to mingle?
Am I single and ready to mingle?
Okay, move on.
Yeah. Okay, so what about people with babies? So it's really funny. I just happened to have a little cousin who recently just had, whether out of accident or on purpose, they had a kid, and like I've had to talk to them about like a lot of things. And one of the things I'll say is, when you have a dependent person, it is several times more difficult. I'm not gonna, like say that it's gonna be a lot easier. But the thing is, like, right, if you stay on these percentage bases that I tell you to, or if you are actually willing to make small sacrifices in terms of frugality, in terms of what your fixed expenses can be, you still can save money. I'm going to give you a good example, right? So even though I make enough money to live in a bigger place than I currently do now, I talked about this with Brian. I actually live in a very small apartment, but I don't pay that much. Like I pay way less than the 50% allowance I give myself for rent. And that allows me to move that extra money over into other areas. Like my savings is actually a little higher than 25%, because when my net income, that rent, my actual rent is actually only 20% of my net income right now. So
it's like really good. Now, to that point, I admire folks that can actually make somewhat of a sacrifice to not inflate their lifestyle. But wouldn't you argue that it's actually quite difficult too? That everyone sees Instagram or see what their friends are doing. They're like, whoa, they're living in this amazing life, and they want to live like that too. So it's difficult sometimes to do what you do.
Right. So I agree. There are times when obviously I have friends whose lifestyles are much more inflated. And the thing is, the way I like to look at it is my friend group is actually very diverse, right? So the best thing I can say is one of my friends, I told him this. I was like, I love you. You know why? Because me and you, we can either be in GA with the rest of the crowd, or if we want, we can go into VIP. Like, it's a choice, right? You make that choice of what you want to do. So in this special case, I say, okay, it's that same mentality as, if I jumped off a bridge, are you going to jump off the bridge with me? And it's like, you just got to stick to that mentality. Sometimes it's difficult. I'm not going to lie. I've been peer pressured where there's times where I don't want to spend money, but then my friends are like, they give me that Peter Griffin where they're like, come on. And here goes my credit card. I'm handing it to them. All right, fine, whatever. Let's do this. And I'll pay for it later. But, it happens.
Maybe I may ask you from this perspective, like, what kind of minds, like, what are some of the things that make you feel like what you're doing now, basically not inflating your lifestyle, how do you stay motivated to do that and not inflating? Like, are there certain things that you're thinking of maybe in the future? Like, this is what I'm working towards. Like, how do you keep yourself motivated to do what you're doing now?
I think the reason I'm able to stay in this kind of mindset is because I realized over time I have no like want or desire for material possessions, which is what most of my mindset's about. I'm actually more of a person driven by like wanting to know things. Like I love reading. I like, studying. I just like knowing things. Like, yeah, right. So that's the thing. Like I'm lucky because I'm motivated by something very different. Like I just love knowledge. Like we talked about it at what was it, something sapien. I actually looked it up and there was this very like there's like this meme where it's like this is what they are. It's just like someone like licking a brain. And that's me. I'm like, wow, that is me. I love intelligence.
Sapiosexuals, yeah, like people who are attracted to intelligence. That's good. I thought you adopted Marie Kondo's, like, get rid of everything. You're a minimalist, only things that spark joy.
I mean, I do toss out a lot. I actually keep doing spring cleaning all the time, but that's also because my place isn't that big. So every time there's something that's like, I feel like it's not something I need, I just kind of toss it. But I also have that really bad habit of like, oh, in the future, I can definitely use this, or people might be. I'll tell you a really funny story. So I was looking through a bunch of wires I had, right, for like my computers and extra wires I kept, and I was like,
why do you have to?
I was like, does any of my laptops even use an Ethernet cable anymore? Like, they're so skinny.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's hard. I get that too. I have moved every year for the last like 9 or 10 years. So I always do like cleanings quite often. So stay nimble. But I've adopted Marie Kondo's. If it doesn't spark joy, it goes in trash.
Right.
So we have Judy. That's Judy, Asian American Legal. She has an awesome law YouTube channel. If anyone ever has law questions, she says greetings from North Carolina. Okay, so now let's talk about investing a little bit. How do you approach investing? I feel like there's so many people that have different thoughts about how best to invest $1,000, let's say. How do you approach investing?
So I used to be very, how do I say? I used to be of the more conservative mindset. I would be like, okay, if you don't know how to invest, which I still tell people, just drop it in indexes. It's a lot easier. You don't have to think too much. Like if the market's moving up, you don't have to do too much research because it's a macroeconomic factor. But one of the big things I've changed was I'm very high in risk tolerance now, extremely high. So the way I look at investing is that since I'm young, this is the only time I can really take risks, right? Once you start getting older, you have to kind of deviate from that and put it into more safer investments. So right now, in terms of investing, I probably have about, I'd say, 60% of some of my investments in what most people call high risk tolerance assets. And
60%. Doge?
I won't say what I have because I don't like to give financial advice because I don't want to be the person to blow up your portfolio. But I'm just saying, like, if it happens.
But Doge will go to the moon.
Yeah, Doge will go to the moon. Yeah, whatever. But
this is our sarcasm, just for anyone that's watching.
Yeah. Please do not just like randomly invest in anything we're talking about. Do your own research. Make your own minds. Thanks. No, but I have a really good story with this one as well. Like, back when cryptocurrency came up, it was like 2016, 2017, right? I had a really hard time like grasping cryptocurrency. I mean, I've known stocks for a long time. I've known bonds. All that stuff. So I when cryptocurrency came out, I was like, I don't understand like what's so good about it. Like I knew the technology was good. This is the one thing I'll always say. Cryptocurrency, the technology behind it, it's great, right? Blockchain is awesome. Like I love it. I hate how it was implemented. Very different, right? Cryptocurrency is tugged along as being the new currency. But when you think about currency, one of the main factors of a currency is that it doesn't have high volatility. Like you want to be able to depend on it. Like if I put $100 in something and like 2 days later, I want to be like, I want to pull out that 100 because now I have an expense I need to pay off, right? No, that's not how cryptocurrency works. Cryptocurrency, you put in $100, tomorrow you can come back and it'll be like 30 and you're like, what happened? It has no real like stop on like when it moves up and down like a stock market or a stock does. So the good thing about that is if you have high volatility and high risk tolerance, cryptocurrency is so fun to trade. I do trade it. I'll tell you guys now. I do trade cryptocurrency, but I will say also I usually cash out most of the time at the end of the night because I can't go to sleep otherwise. So I'll tell you.
Wow.
So very different, right? Very, very, I like long term, I would agree with, a couple like Ethereum, Bitcoin, you can hold it. It's not as crazy, but, it just depends on your risk tolerance, like I said.
Very interesting. So yeah, maybe like some of these other comments that are coming in would be fascinating to like review. I'm like actually missing part of it. Is Judy says like we can't see the full thing on the screen. I have to actually have my YouTube channel up and to see this. So Judy actually says tomorrow night she has a live stream about her favorite and worst investments. I'm very curious, Judy, what your favorite and worst investments are. Maybe you can give us like a sneak preview. Johnny says Doge. Linda says thoughts on ARK and Kathy Wood. And Judy actually says Money with Min was recommending ARK, so I bought some shares and wound up losing 500. So I'm very curious. What do you think about ARK and Kathy Woods?
It depends, right? Like on how you look at it. How do you invest is one of the best things I like to tell people, right? So my profile, like I told you, right, I have a 60% high risk tolerance. I drop about 30% in blue chips, and then 10% I try to throw into something that pays out dividends.
So your 60% includes blue chip stocks?
It depends on if they're considered high risk. I don't consider most blue chips high risk, so I don't put it in. But again, like I said, when I do those big investments in high risk, I've done my research. I have, I've probably known about the company for a lot longer than most people. I'll give you a good one, right? For Palantir. I actually knew about Palantir way back in 2013, 14, right? Way before it became public. So the minute it came out, I didn't have like a hesitation on like into investment. I liked it, and I've done my research for years, and I was like, you know what? I don't think it's worth 10. I have my own price target for it. I'm not gonna say here because I'm not a CFA. I shouldn't be giving my public, price targets or anything. But I have my own price target for it, and since I got in on it at under 10, so
wow,
that one is doing amazing right now.
Yeah, it is. Okay.
But I also have my bad ones, right? Like when I was working for Citi, I had very high trade restrictions. I had to wait for certain things, and one of the bad ones I got in is I still like it, but it for some reason it's doing terrible is EDGN. So I really like computational stuff. So I looked into it. I thought it would do good, and it's not doing that great. But at the same time, for me, my timeline for it is not within a month or two. This is like a 5-year projection, 6-year projection. So I'm still okay with certain losses to it. But yeah, with ARK, I will say this: the portfolio for ARK is good in terms of horizon investing. Right, I do think that Kathy Woods does look at these and goes, "This is probably what's going to help benefit us in the future." But if you're looking at it in terms of things like present value, how much the company actually generates, her portfolios would be trash to a lot of value investors.
Yeah, I would say, well, maybe I'll make a comment about Judy's thing first, and I'll say something. Judy says your microphone isn't as good. It sounds a little tinny or echoey. Turning the volume as best. I think we troubleshooted that a little bit. I don't know if we can really improve too much with Mark's microphone.
Yeah, my mic is a small, like, cheap omnidirectional mic, so it's not the best. I'll try to talk louder. If you guys see any other voice problems, let me know. I actually have this voice thing on the left of our stream that I try to watch to make sure that I'm actually talking at a fairly
good level.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm trying to do the best we can. The thing I'll say about ARK is that I think exactly what you said. A lot of people looked at ARK's like insane portfolio. I think like the average S&P 500 was like somewhere between 30 to 100% returns last year. Then it was like QQQ, or your NASDAQ 100 was like 300%. Then it's like ARK is 900%. And you see this broadcasted on the news. So everyone and their mom is jumping into it. And in my mind is that once everyone is jumping on it, that's probably the wrong time to jump into something. You're on the tip. But then again, we also had the whole issue with the low interest rates. And then it just like tanked growth stocks. I'm very long on some of her picks, but I'm talking like long, like 5, 10, 15 years. And I don't think many people who trade nowadays are wanting that long time horizon. Let's see. What is the next thing here? Linda says, should people rely on themselves or a financial advisor? What resources would you recommend for the everyday investor?
So the way I would recommend investing for someone that has first started is you have two ways to look at it, right? You look at it at a microeconomic, which is single stock picks or single type investments, or like I said, macroeconomic, where you kind of look at the whole market as a whole and try to invest more in an index, right? So pick the one you like most first. That's one. Second, once you do pick, so I'll give you I'll give you a way. So we'll just let's say, for instance, you really love Microsoft. You want to know more about Microsoft. You can, you want to read about Microsoft. That's how I usually invest, right? Like I know the companies that I invest in. Like I actually do the time to research in them, everything from their board of directors to things. Like I really like to get comfortable with the information I have with them, and then I will invest in stocks. That's one way of doing it. As my risk tolerance increased, I really started to believe in technicals. So there are some things in my portfolio that are based on purely numbers. I have no idea about who the CEO is. I don't know who the CFO is. I don't know what the quality of the product is. All I know is that, let's say, for instance, on a single day, on a single week, I see that their average trading volume is exceptionally large for buying positions. I will move into that position into a single day, and then I will sell out by the end of the day once I make X%, which I will name, because I need to be very strict about whether you are investing in something or you are trading in it. Because a lot of people let emotions hit them, and then they will hold something that they were bought as a trade, or they will do the opposite. They will trade on something, but then they're like, oh no, now that it's doing well, I'm going to invest in it. Never do that. That's how you lose a lot of money.
Yeah. What was I trying to say there? Emotional trading is a thing. I think most people trade on emotions, which makes it very difficult. And that tends to make people buy high and sell low.
Yeah.
Not always, but like just in general emotions, you see the entire stock market tank and most people be like, oh no, I want to take what I can first, versus like maybe the millennials have gotten better. Like every time there's a dip, people are like, oh, it's time to buy. But I feel like it's hard for most people to do trades because they trade on emotions and they end up buying high and selling low.
And like I said, one of the good practices when you first start out, if you really want to know one that I used to do, was I actually set there's something called a good till call when you set up a limit buy or sell. Put that on, and no matter what, leave it on, right? So like, let's say, for instance, you want to buy a stock at 5 and you say if it ever hits 7, you're selling everything. Put a good to call on that, and then never look at it again, because that's how you get emotional, because then you'll be like, oh my God, it actually made it to 7. Maybe it'll make it to 8. That's your thought, right? But no, like stick to what your principle was before, unless you do some research that you think would change that otherwise. In most cases, I will say that I do that a lot. I used to be really bad at that when I first started, like back, when I was in high school, college, even even after I started working, people get that rush, like, oh, I can make more money. But the thing is, like, look, when you get into investment, you pull in 20%, and you've only invested like in that thing for like, let's say, a month, 2 months, whatever your target was at the time, you did good. You beat the S&P 3 years, whatever, right? So like, be confident in the choices you make when you're making an investment or a trade. That's all I gotta say. Like, just be confident in yourself.
I like Dogecoin. I'm confident in Dogecoin. That's sarcasm, just FYI again. Anyways, Judy says, is he using a microphone? Maybe try getting closer.
Oh, okay.
And then Johnny says, are you a day trader? Are you a day trader?
I won't say I'm a day trader, because like I said, I work. There was actually a 2-month stint when I like quit my job. So I tried day trading. I did pretty good, actually. I made about 20% on crypto, and in stocks I made like 9%. But I will tell you that it is a lot of work. Like, I literally was up really early in the morning. I stood there, stared at my screen until the market closed at 4, and then with cryptocurrency, I think I stayed up until like 11 before I sold out all my positions all the time, and I was just like, okay.
Wow. So
I'm awake at 6. Don't go to sleep till 11. Don't end work till 11. I don't know if I like that either.
So I have a very different investing philosophy than you, I can tell. And I'm kind of curious how you rationalize yours. So it sounds like you spend 60% in like these high risk tolerance type investments. And then you also, sometimes you invest in something and you might sell it by the end of the day because you want to sleep good. So I can say like I'm opposite in the sense that probably 90% of my entire portfolio is in index funds. I probably spend about 10% in like super high risk things. We're talking like crypto or individual stocks and some of like meme stocks too, things like that. That's about 10%. This is kind of like for fun. At the same time, so that's one area we differ. And then the other area we differ is like I'm very much a hold something for at least a year to maximize on the long-term capital gains versus short-term capital gains. But in your mind, like usually it's more worth it in that case. I'm trying to like think about how you think through that in terms of short-term capital gains versus long-term capital gains.
Okay, so that's the thing, right? A lot of people will go to you and be like, oh, but if you hold it for a year, you won't pay capital gains tax. You'll just pay, whatever your tax bracket is. And then I tell them, I'm like, okay, so the way I explain that to people is that it depends. Like, how are you using the additional, gains that you got before, right? If you do it and then you hold it for another 11 months, you don't really do anything with it, you're right, 100% right. But if you're active, right, let's say you have 100, in 1 month, you pick something, you said it was going to go up to 8%, you take 8% out, you're at a 108. Then you go again and you're like, okay, there's another thing I want to do. You took another month, you get another 8%. See, all of that additional like compounds into how much you're earning. So that capital gains, it becomes irrelevant, right? Like you're gaining more than you would get taxed at the end from the stuff that you were cashing out in. So it always depends on how it is. Like, I agree with you for the most part. If there's something I see and I'm like, okay, there's nothing really I'm interested in, and I can hold out for another like 2 months, or no, usually, for me at least, I reevaluate almost at least once a month, to at least once a quarter, on certain stocks and like what I think is gonna keep going up, what I think needs to be sold out, what I need to buy a new position in based on certain news. Like, that's how I think about it. I'm like, oh, this money I'm gonna reinvest it anyways. So even if you did it on let's say you only change every 4 quarters because that's when most companies report, you're still compounding that gain you got if you're actually doing well. So that's my argument for that. It's like you are most likely going to be making more money if you're compounding properly. So that capital gains tax that you're getting, capital gains that you're going to be saving probably isn't better. I think that's a mental trap that a lot of people get into. They're like, oh, if I hold it, but if you hold it, what happens if the stock goes down? You could have just made 30%. Like I said, I do risky stocks, right? So there are stocks where, they'll shoot it to 30%, and then I'm disciplined enough to be like, I'm going to sell it. But other people are like, no, I can keep going. But then the next like day, it's already down like 15%. And they're like, no, it's going to go up. See what I'm saying? Like, cash out when it hits your, like, that's what I'm saying. Like, pick what you would consider a trade and what you consider an investment. If you're trading, follow the stuff that you say you're going to do, because it will backfire, and it has backfired on me. So that's why I'm saying this. Like, I remember when I get into pharmaceuticals. This is probably where you'd be better than me, Brian. And I remember I lost, like, I think at the time, I was just playing around, so I brought about like 5,000 to play around in pharmaceuticals because I didn't really know it that well. I think I lost like 80% of it because I fell into that trap of going. So I only had $4,000 like within, I think, 6-month span, because I kept going. I would invest in something because I would like try to follow these clinical trial patterns, and I came up with like a way to do it. But I never stuck with it, because then it would shoot up like 20, and I'm like, yes, I'm smart, I know it. And then like 3 days later, like it just all falls down, and I'm just like, dang it, why didn't I cash out? And then that became a repeated pattern where I just got too excited because of how big the volatility was in pharmaceuticals. So that's why when crypto came around, I was like, oh, I've done this before. It's just pharmaceuticals, but it's called crypto.
Yeah, those are very risky. So what I'll say is like, and I wasn't, I will cash out on certain short-term trades as well, and take short-term capital gains as well. I was just gonna say we probably just have different risk tolerances there. And then when I do want to do like riskier stuff that I want to trade on a daily, like less than a year, short term, I usually just do everything in my Roth IRA. Just to make it easier. But I think it makes sense for a lot of, like, this is just different people. Some people, just whatever your preference is. I just like to, I'm probably more conservative than you in this. It's obvious that I'm more conservative than you in some of the investments, but sometimes they say high risk, high reward. Let's see some of the comments. Johnny says, emotional trading is so dangerous. Judy says, remember, I'm a cheapskate. not going to buy another mic unless my YouTube channel starts making over a few hundred a month. And Judy's probably is gonna make a lot. Judy started a YouTube channel last year, and she's like, I think almost like 1.5 or 2K subs already. Like she's done really great, and I would not be surprised if she starts making a good amount of money on YouTube soon. Johnny says, what do you think are great dividend stocks? I get the impression that Mark wants to avoid recommending specific picks because technically you're not supposed to unless you're a CFP or CFA for you individually.
I'll give you this advice though. When you pick dividend stocks, what you want to look at is for any stock that actually is consistent paying out their specific dividends and that their stock price has very low volatility, okay? I'm going to give you an example of one. I'm not going to say invest in it, but I'll give you an example of one that's really low volatility in terms of stock price, really good dividend, Verizon. I'm just going to give you one so then you can use that as an example to find any good dividend stock.
Related to that, let me ask you a fairly debatable question here. If someone is young, let's say under the age of 30, and they are trying to maximize their gains by the time they retire, let's say in like 50s or 60s, what are your thoughts on a dividend stock strategy versus a growth stock strategy? Or like, is dividend stocks a good play?
I'm going to be 100% honest. No.
Why?
The reason I say that is because with how inflation works and how low most dividends are for most stocks, like plus remember, you got to also remember that you don't want a high price volatility. If you have high price volatility but the dividend is high or low, whatever it is, like the dividend is based off of a calculation of what the stock price is most of the time, because you're saying that the dividend yield for the stock price is this. So the case is, in most cases, dividends are not good in terms of you being younger. Like I said, you want to have a higher risk tolerance, right? You want to be able to grow your portfolio when you're young and you can take chances. And then when you are older, that's when you want to move into something that has more consistency and the cash flow for you, because you need to spend that money, right? And that's when I say, like, as a young person, have a little more risk tolerance. I'm not going to say like go crazy like me. Like I think my portfolio is absolutely absurd sometimes. I look at it and oh my God, I'm ridiculous. But then, when I hate saying numbers, but I will say that I do consistently beat the S&P 500 on a yearly basis, and it is my yield is usually double digits. I won't say what double digits, but they're always double digits. So that's the case. Like, you have to be one. I'm lucky because I like doing this stuff, so I'm confident in what I do. But at the same time, it's like I said earlier, you pick what you want. If you want to do index investing, it's a lot. Me personally, I think it's a lot easier. I used to do it. Your gains were consistent, but ever since I think about 3 years ago, I don't think it moves. The index moves as fast as I used to want it to do, so I don't like it as much anymore. But it's all up to you, right? Like, where's your risk tolerance? It's your money. Like, figure out where you want to be and how you're gonna get there, and then you gotta come up with a plan and attack it.
Yeah, I like that, and I think we're probably very similar in that case. I would say that for the most part, for the average daily investor that doesn't know too much, I would probably still say index funds, because you don't want to risk them losing anything, because like they're still do perfectly great, and that's what I did for the last like 8 years now. But I also agree with you in the sense that we should have more tolerance, and I also, like you, probably enjoy dabbling in this kind of stuff. So I do have a fair amount of individual stocks because it does do pretty well, and I benchmark myself to the index and also do pretty well against the index. So I do think individual stocks and being more risky is great, especially if you know more about personal finance. And then the last point was like, what about, I think there may be a case, and this is the part that I haven't fully rationalized yet, is perhaps the next topic, the FIRE movement. So a lot of people talk about that now, financially independent, retire early. I think there is a case to be made for dividend stocks in people who want to pursue the FIRE movement. I don't know when to do it, but because, FIRE movement people are theoretically trying to retire in their 30s or in their 40s. So you want to have a dividend portfolio to like sustain that. My thought is that you probably want to be more non-dividend, just like growth stocks. And then once you're actually retired, flip everything over to dividends. to maximize your total return. What do you think about that?
So, for anyone that doesn't know what the FIRE movement is, it's pretty much like be super stingy, be super frugal so you can retire early. That's the very basis of what the FIRE movement is, right? And for that, I have agreements and disagreements to that. It goes with what I explained earlier, right? Like time is money, or that time is money kind of scheme, right? So there is a point in which money can't buy back time. So for instance, let's say you say from 30 to 50 you're going to be super frugal and you're just going to save all this money, right? But in that 20 years you're going to lose a lot of moments, right? Because you're going to have to make choices. You have to make those choices where you're like, I won't do certain things because it costs too much money, or I won't go to these events because they don't cost too much money. But in that 20-year lifespan, you're missing a lot of moments that you could, that I will tell you right now that do not have a fiscal value, or ever will have a fiscal value. And sure, you'll retire early, but like at what costs, right? So it always depends, like where's your cost for this? And then what I tell people is also like, what is your target price for retiring? I bet you most people don't even know how much they need to retire. Like, I'll tell you right now, if you think it's $1 million, you're wrong. You're 100% wrong. Yeah. So I know for me personally, I think that I'll tell you my number. So I think that if I actually wanted to retire and like be somewhat decently comfortable, I think my number is about 3 million, right? And that goes with, I've done a series of calculations where I would throw my money, like what kind of dividends I'd be looking at, stuff like that. What kind of if I bought bonds, like what kind of returns am I looking at from those coupons? But yeah, that's the FIRE movement for me. Look, if you have that mentality, all for it, right? But again, for me, I think it just goes with your life experiences. Like, what are you looking to get out of your life? If you're looking to retire early and then enjoy all the years after that point, hey, more power to you. You guys be frugal, save your money. I respect it. And then if you're the opposite, where you're like, look, I want to live my life. I like being young. I can work until I'm old. Hey, I respect that too. Like, I think that people get a bad mentality of, where people are like, oh, they're careless with their money. But I don't think you can ever really judge someone by how they spend, because one, you don't know how much they earn. When I told you guys, like, I do everything based off of percentages. So your, $50 could be, 10% of your stream. I'm just making it up, right? I hope that's no one's actual thing, right? It's total net income, and then but someone else's 10% is $10,000. Like, it's a complete different like mindset when you allocate it in basis of percentages in terms of actually real dollar amounts.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So let me ask you: do you subscribe to the FIRE movement or no?
Oh no, like I have my own like breakdowns of how I like to save. I don't think I could ever be that frugal again. Like I said, I already cut my expenses where I think I can, but there's certain things I just can't cut out anymore.
Yeah, I wonder. We probably would both subscribe to. So I'm not FIRE movement necessarily. I'm like I believe in some of the things they do, but I don't believe in scaling back my lifestyle to the point where you miss out on your moments. Because like you, I did that quite a bit before, and I have a lot of. I never say I have regrets, but I wish I could have done it differently in that sense. But I believe more in are you familiar with the Wall Street Playboys?
No, I am not. What's that?
They're very similar. So they're similar in the sense that they believe in saving a significant amount of money towards your financial goals, let's say retirement, or let's say even FIRE, like you want to FIRE. But what they subscribe to is like at some point you're going to reach a threshold where you can't, if you save more, you just can't spend it all.
Right.
So what they believe in is like know that threshold, and everything else, play with it. So it's like kind of balancing both, but at the same time also hustling to get to that part.
Right.
So like doing all those things. Very interesting. If you get a chance to check out Wall Street Playboys, it's very interesting philosophies and how to approach enjoying the most out of life, but also making sure you save for the future so you're set.
Right. Huh. Yeah, I didn't look that one up.
Okay, let's check out the comments. Judy says 1832 subs, but only make 85. That's not bad. $85 a month on ads so far. A lot of effort for peanuts, but still fun. You're like starting a YouTube channel and in pretty much like a year and making $85 a month, which is only going to go up, is not too bad at all, I would say. She says 3 million sounds extremely high to me, but if you're in a very high cost of living area like New York and like spend have luxurious things, it may be reasonable. My number is 2.5, but 2.5 million, but I think that's actually on the lower end of things.
Yeah.
But okay. Very cool. Let's see. What about we only have a couple more minutes left on here too. Do you think this bodes well? I wonder if we should ask some questions about Asian Americans and finance. I wonder if the audience knows about this too. And I think we talked about this beforehand. Asian Americans have one of the highest net worths in the United States. And why do you think that?
And what was it? It's funny. So the reason I believe, and I actually have done research on this as well, Asians actually have are known as one of the highest groups, the highest net worth, is because Asian families really push education. Asian Americans probably, on a percentage basis of like our population, have the most degrees. I remember I did some research on this a while ago, and that was the case. Like just Asian Americans, especially ones from very traditional or immigrant families, they really push education. I'm from one of those families, so like education to me was really pushed hard. And I think that's the reason a lot of us have higher net incomes, because education plus salary usually go hand in hand. The more highly educated you are, the more likely that you have a better job.
Okay, so it makes sense. A lot of it being ingrained in our culture. Do you think this applies to Asian Americans that are not first generation?
What was that? I'm sorry.
Do you think any of this applies to Asian Americans that are not necessarily first generation? Because you said a lot of this is contingent on first generation immigrant mindset. What about maybe second, third, fourth generation? Like, do you think this impacts them at all?
It depends, right? Because it depends on how the person, like the next generation, carries on certain mentalities. I have cousins who have kids now, and their mentality is a little different, right? They're not as strict with their kids. They don't threaten them with pots, pans, and sandals, like if they're not getting A's. So it's a very different mentality. Like, I watch some of them, and I'm like, you are really nice to your children. Like, do you not remember we used to be chased down with getting like terrible grades? Like, yeah, but I don't want them to grow up like that. I'm like, why not? We turned out great.
Well, what did they use on you to like keep you in line?
Oh, right. Yeah. So, my mom and my dad were pretty much masters of using any, they had if I did something wrong. So like, I remember so usually we got a report card, every quarter when we were in middle school. I still remember this moment in my head, right? The first time I ever learned that I need to be very wary of what they have in their hand was I told my mom I think I might have a B. She freaked out. I didn't get a B, thank God, but I remember she freaked out, and I just remember what was in her hand. And I was like, pot, and I was just like, I could have been hit with that. Like, I gotta be like really careful about when I tell them I have had bad grades. I mean, like the normal Asian, I never really had bad grades, so that never really like turned out too bad. I did do some bad things that needed some physical attention for me to correct my character, but definitely it's a learning experience. Like, I don't know. It's hard for me because, like I said, when I see like how my cousins who are about my age or my age or younger, they have kids. I just see how they treat their kids, and I'm like, oh my God, these kids, they don't understand how well they have it. Like, they don't even know what fear is like for having a bad grade. Like, my one cousin has like 2 kids, and she's just like baby them, like, oh, it's okay if you got a B, and I was just like, what?
What?
And I'm just like, wow. And what was it? One of my other cousins, I don't know. This might not be fair because of COVID, right? Like, she's still alive. She got an F, and I was just like, whoa, how are you still here? Like, if I ever got an F, I don't think I would have
roasted. I don't think I've ever got it. That would have been terrible. All right, so three things, and then
Sure.
we probably should have to wrap up. One is like 2 questions here. One is actually don't remember what it was, but you talking about pot. Your mom was holding a pot. Do you think if you got hit by that pot, you would have turned out to be a pothead?
No, 100%.
No. Okay. No. Okay. The second thing is we'll probably read through these comments and then ask the last question and then wrap up the thing here. So Linda says, what indulgences do you need to cut to meet your FIRE number sooner?
I I don't think I need to. I'm still pretty targeted to, if I really wanted to, I could retire at 50, like with my current partner.
Oh, dang. That's pretty nice.
But that's the thing though, right? Like I said, I'm such a, like my we talked about the content level, right? I don't think I'm that person that would really want to retire. You know, like I
You
actually
want to keep working.
yeah, I want to be able, I want to still move around. I still want to do stuff. Like I might not do something as intensive as I do now, but like I don't ever see myself being that person to just be like, I just want to like relax, because I know that, like I said, I get very unsettled when I think that I'm not moving forward. It's a really weird like mentality to have. I try to explain it to people, but you know, some people get it, some people don't. It's just,
we're in the same line. I would
Yeah.
be exactly like you too.
Yeah.
So Judy says, I think it's because a lot of Asian Americans live in high cost of living areas like Hawaii, California, NYC, and the ultra rich immigrants push the average up. Not being hit by pots. I think that's funny. I've never been chased around by a pot, but I've been chased around by a lot of other things. Judy says, I see even in my extended family, a second and third gen are not as hardworking. So I think that's interesting to see that kind of thought process in the later generation, and do not make as much as their immigrant parents did. Same goes with obesity. Fourth gen and Japanese Americans are often obese. That's interesting. What does Mark do for a living? Is he in pharmacy? I don't know if you want to share that, Mark.
Oh, Judy, yeah, I'm a data engineer, so that I work as a data engineer for a startup right now.
Oh, that's right. So Judy says she missed the beginning. So Mark is also a telecommunications major. He did a master's in finance. He was a chef before. He used to choreograph dance. He does like data engineer type stuff. So he does a lot of stuff. And we use the word like jack of all trades, master of none.
Yep, that's a good description.
But maybe not master of a lot of things. Let's ask the last question, and then we're gonna wrap up this interview. So in conclusion, a lot of this was, about personal finance, things like that. What tips and or advice do you have for others, especially those in college or graduate school? Basically, they're still in the education system when it comes to loans, personal finance, what have you.
Yeah, so this is one thing I really wish someone told me when I was going to school, and I have passed it on to all of my younger cousins. Any person I speak to that's younger than me and they ever ask about like school stuff or like finance advice, I tell people that when you take out a college loan, a personal or educational loan, it's an investment in yourself, right? Don't look at it as debt. I always hear people go, I don't want to go into debt. I'm like, if you're going to debt for 40K investing in yourself, I would bet $1 million on myself over and over again. Like that's the thing. Do not look at when you take out a loan, especially if it's to better yourself, as a way of going into debt. Like really look at it as an investment in the person you're going to become. And that's the other thing I want to point out to most people too. I don't think that although I know my parents really pushed me, older people that always push you, I don't think that honestly nowadays college or even higher education is the answer for everybody. Okay. And I say this because the fact is you can learn free. It's the fact that you have to know that you are actually going to do something that you think is you're going to be able to continue doing. And the reason I say that is because, for instance, a lot of I have the one I told you about. My cousin was actually talking to me about whether he should go to college or he should go to technical school. And I told him, I was like, what do you want to do in technical school? I really wanted to see if like he did the research, and he did. And I told him, look, I'm going to tell you what I told my two other cousins. Two of my other cousins actually came to give me advice. Actually told them, don't go to college, just go into the military, because we had a real talk. They're both in the military, and they're both financially better for it, right? Because they would have gone into debt in something that they probably would have failed at the time. And now they're going to school because the Air Force wants them to get a better education. They're actually willing to do it now. See, very different mentalities at different times. So the case is, like I said, my advice is when you take out a loan, look at it as an investment in yourself and see if that investment is going to pay off. And if the answer in your head, like be honest with yourself, is no, find something that you are willing to do in that moment, And that's the best advice I can give anyone that I think is young now.
I feel like that was like a 2-minute TED Talk. Very nice. We're probably more similar than different in those comments that you made. Okay. Well, we're going to wrap this up. Judy says, one more question from Judy. Wow, sounds great. Does he also sing? I think you do, don't you?
No, I'm Judy. I'm the one Filipino that can't. I can't.
What? I was going to say, you Filipinos.
I'm the dancing Filipino. That's why. I'm a dancing Filipino. I can get all the talent.
Okay. Well, we're going to wrap up the live stream here. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in. Mark, thanks for jumping on and speaking with us and sharing your story. Super awesome tips. And then we will see you all next week. Okay.
All right,
Bye, guys.